This is The Guardian.
I just think that organisation and that family are particularly good at spinning their story. As someone who's been on the other side of the story trying to unspin it from time to time, I can tell you it gets pretty difficult. They play hardball, and it isn't pleasant. It's all right to say you've got to be tough and stand up to it.
From Guardian Australia, I'm Sarah Martin, and this is Gina, a podcast series about Australia's richest person. The stories her family chooses to celebrate.
There was this mythical narrative set up by Lang Hancock right from the start. I think it was very, very effective, at least until the pesky journalist comes along and blows it apart.
And the ones they don't.
When they talked about closing the mine and closing this road, it was going into those gorges.
Yeah.
Closed it because of the dust. We used to travel around here ourselves here a lot.
Do you think about it often? Do you worry about it?
I think we leave the past behind, but we, always conscious of our traditional homeland and what's going to happen to it. None of our people left here.
This is episode 6, Mythmaking. So in this episode, we'll be interrogating the myth-making surrounding Gina, the Hancocks, and their stories. And I want to start by returning to the story that they say started it all. Lang Hancock's discovery flight over the Pilbara in 1952.
And that meant the big cumulus clouds were there. The only way out of it was to dive through a gorge, which I did do. The walls of this looked to be iron.
Gina celebrates its anniversary as a national day of significance. It's prompted her to call Lang the patron saint of our development, crediting him with unlocking Australia's resources sector.
That day means a lot to Australia. Where on earth would we be in this country without the iron ore industry?
But not everyone is on board with the story.
The myth of the discovery flight, you can imagine how it caught the public imagination.
This is Bernard Lagan. He's a Sydney-based journalist for The Times in London.
A man battling through a storm, this old, rickety old Auster plane, single-engine plane, skimming the tops of the Hamersley Range. He's got his wife next to him. They're navigating just by sight, peering through the clouds and the storm, lightning going off. And they get out of the hole and land the plane, and at the same time discover billions of dollars of iron ore. Isn't that a fantastic story?
He says that people have questioned aspects of the story for more than 50 years. In 1974, a journalist decided to investigate the notion of Lang flying through a Pilbara thunderstorm. That journalist, Neil Phillipson, writes a book called Man of Iron, and he checks the Bureau of Meteorology records for rainfall.
There was no rainfall at all, according to BOM. And that rainfall records are still on the BOM's website. They're remarkable. They have the most detailed information there.
Lang Hancock actually spoke about this theory in 1990. He accuses Phillipson of being paid to denigrate him. Gina, however, stands by the story and the thunderstorm. In a tribute she wrote about Lang for The Australian in 2010, she said the following, which we've had read out by a voice actor.
These jealous types even went as far as to say there were no recorded storm clouds that forced Dad to fly low through that gorge, so Dad was lying about his discovery flight. They are yet to be able to name and prove where such a weather station was in this part of the then remote bush, which was in those days without even a road, let alone an airfield, to support their claim that there were no storm clouds. My father, however, did have a witness, my mother, Hope Hancock, who was in the plane, a little Oster, with him, and very grateful for my father's piloting skills on that bumpy, hazardous flight.
I think they should really say, look, I'm sorry, the rainfall records don't back it up, but my father was a wonderful storyteller.
Questions have also been raised about the exact date the flight occurred. Lang originally said it happened on November 16, but over the years, 2 other dates have also been put forward by the family.
So we have 3 dates. I might add, none of which rain didn't fall on any of them. But the fact that there's 3 dates, all sourced in some way back to Lang Hancock and Peter Wright, does make you think, how good was the record keeping in relation to the Great Discovery flight? Wouldn't you think that there was a known date?
Mm.
You might say, well, look, the logbook still exists, and it does. The logbook's on Gina Rinehart's site, but when you go and look at that logbook, the pages around the crucial period of the days in November 1952 don't follow in sequence.
Then there's something else. So the reason the Discovery flight captures the imagination is because of how well it encapsulates the feats of an Australian maverick, discovering for the first time the giant reserves of iron ore in the Pilbara. However, records exist that show that the mineral wealth of the area was known about already before Lang's flight. One such record concerns a British man called Harry Woodward.
I quite like his story. I mean, the guy's 25. Comes out to Australia from England. I described him as a compulsive roamer, and he spent his first year in Western Australia mapping 175,000 square kilometres of country, most of it on the back of a camel. Woodward actually wrote, this is 1890, quote, "This is essentially an iron ore country, for one cannot travel a mile in the parts where the older rocks appear at the surface without encountering a lode. There is enough to supply the whole world. From the large quantity of iron in this colony, it is impossible to work with any degree of accuracy with a magnetic compass."
According to Lang's old nemesis, the former WA Premier Charles Court, whom you heard about back in episode 2, Lang knew about Woodward and his reports. And Court says that when Lang was fighting to remove the iron ore embargo, he would bring up Woodward and his discoveries as proof of the minerals in the region.
I mean, it's interesting that clearly this flight was a key part of the Hancock family story. Why is it so important to their narrative?
Oh, I think it goes to the popular image of Lang Hancock, the swashbuckling, self-made discoverer of mineral wealth and aviator. And there's no doubt that he was a very fine aviator. And look, I think you've got to give Lang Hancock credit for urging all his efforts, well, mainly to overturn the export ban, because look what it turned into, enormous wealth for Australia, enormous wealth. It is still our primary export. And I kind of think the embellishment of the story of the Discovery flight, and I think we can safely say there's some embellishment going on here, adds to the larrikin image. It really does. I mean, it's what you might expect that Lang Hancock would do if he wanted to be absolutely sure of not only getting rid of the export ban, but getting control of the processing of iron ore, which ultimately his daughter did for her company. No question about that. So, Australia can look back and probably say they owe Lang Hancock billions. But, I don't think it stretches the truth to say that he really was the father of the iron ore industry, simply because he campaigned so hard to get the export ban lifted.
Whether or not the doubts raised by Bernard and others are material, he says there's a practical reason why the story is so fundamental to the Hancock fortune.
There is the question of finder's rights. If you wanted to make a case to the West Australian government that I want to build a mine, it was much better if you could show that you had finder's rights. And Neil Phillipson in 1974 was really the first person to put forward a solid case that the motivation for Lang Hancock to embellish the flight of 1952, to talk about the rainstorm, the great discovery of iron ore, was to be able to claim finder's rights.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because on one level it's sort of like, well, it doesn't matter much. I mean, he still obviously played a crucial role in, as you say, having the iron ore export embargo lifted and developing the iron ore industry in Australia. But it's sort of interesting then why this matters so much to the family.
Well, yes. Well, I suppose every family wishes to protect, the legacy of the founder or the best known of the founders. And I'm sure that's what Gina Rinehart's doing.
So in Hancock family law, the discovery flight is the first step towards Lang's lifelong dream, a dream to own and operate his own mine. A dream he would never realise in his lifetime, but one that his daughter would in hers. It's a compelling narrative. But what if I told you that it's a little bit more complicated than that? Because Lang Hancock did own and operate a mine before 1952 and that discovery flight. However, you're unlikely to hear Gina talk about it much. And it wasn't an iron mine.
I think looking on the map, it looks like the dot is in there, which, I mean, it would have been a very beautiful place.
We've talked a lot about the station of Gina's childhood, Mulga Downs. But just on the borders of that station is a place that has been completely abandoned and was at one time officially wiped off the map, as if it never even existed.
Hang on.
No, I just want to ask, BT, is Wittenoom town that way as well? Yeah, okay.
So we're going closer to Wittenoom town.
Once it was a thriving mining community, until it unleashed an immense tragedy upon thousands of the people who lived and worked there. A place called Wittenoom.
Yeah.
So when you grew up, when you were here, when you were a kid, what are your memories of the town and how busy it was?
It was a busy town. Everybody was here. A lot of people.
We're standing on the road directly in front of where Wittenoom used to be. Right behind us is the road to Mulga Downs. Brian Tucker, the Bunjarong-Yabali traditional owner who you heard from in episode 1, grew up here.
And I went to school there.
You went to?
Yeah.
With Gina? Gina went to school there?
Yeah, she went earlier before me. She's a lot older than me.
The roads are all blocked off. There's signs saying do not enter. I mean, you just kind of feel like you've pulled up in the middle of nowhere. Brian points to where there used to be landmarks, and now there's just nothing.
So you could see it from the road? It was...
Oh, just in here, corner. Just in this corner.
Yeah, right.
Beyond us, in the distance over the range, is the largest contaminated area in the Southern Hemisphere. Europe has Chernobyl. Australia has Wittenoom.
Yeah, when you go use the drone, when you see the old race course, it's full of asbestos.
And the dust is everywhere.
Where are the tailings now? Which direction?
Straight in there.
This way.
For more than 20 years, Wittenoom was an asbestos mining town. Asbestos is a group of naturally occurring minerals made up of tiny fibres, and when those fibres become airborne and are inhaled, they can cause damage to the lungs and other organs. This can cause asbestosis, and in more serious cases, mesothelioma, an extremely aggressive lung cancer. Once you have mesothelioma, there is no cure, and death usually follows 6 to 18 months after diagnosis. It's estimated that more than 2,000 workers and residents out of some 20,000, or 1 in 10 people, have died from exposure to asbestos at Wittenoom. That number is still growing.
But we used to use this road here.
Yeah.
Walk up here to the movies from Mulga Downs.
What movies did you see? Do you remember?
Western movies.
It's eerie standing there in front of all these warning signs. There's this moment where a big truck drives down the road and whips up all this dust around us. And you know, it's not likely asbestos dust, but it did make us all hold our breaths for a moment.
So the town is between here and the range?
Yeah. You see that old trees, if you take a shot.
You know, the echoes of Wittenoom are very real. If anything, they're louder.
In 1989, a young band called Midnight Oil read a book by Ben Hills called Blue Murder about what happened at Wittenoom.
My name's Peter Garrett, and I served in the federal parliament as a minister, and I'm a singer in a rock band called Midnight Oil. I ran off and read the book as well, and then we came back in and worked it up as a track, which eventually became Blue Sky Mine. I mean, we knew a little about it, probably just from little news pieces of the day, but nothing like the detail that was in that book, nor, to be honest, the scandal of what had happened to the workers there, the way that they'd been treated, and what the long-term likely impacts of exposure to asbestos dust actually was. It was the last song to go on that record, and it was the one that we really, in a way, worked the hardest on. And then suddenly it was out, and the next thing you know, of course, it's on MTV, and it became a recognisable and a popular song.
My God is stretched out, it is crushed up and broken. My life that is lived is no more than a token. Who strike the flint upon the stone and tell me why?
I suspect only few people recognise Blue Sky Mine is about Wittenoom. But fewer still realise that the man who is lionised as the founder of Australia's iron ore industry also kick-started the production of blue asbestos in Australia.
But if I work all day on the Blue Sky Mine, there'll be food on the table tonight. Still I walk up and down on the Blue Sky Mine.
Well, the Hancock fortune essentially starts at Wittenoom with asbestos mining. And I think the public probably don't associate Gina Rinehart with Wittenoom and what happened there. But that was a Hancock enterprise. It started as a Hancock enterprise.
Still waiting for medicine. The sweat of my brow keeps on feeding the engine. Hope the crumbs in my pocket can keep me for another night.
My first effort probably at mining was the development of the blue asbestos industry. I have to go up the Wittenoom gorges, and it's an ideal place, to play bush rangers and hunt dingoes and so on and so forth. And I'd see this asbestos, blue asbestos, what they call floaters.
When Lang was growing up, the area around Mulga Downs was all officially pastoral land. He says that he first found asbestos in one of the gorges at just 10 years old.
And I had one of these floaters, a very nice one, with seams of asbestos in it, as a sort of a doorstop on the homestead at Mulga Downs.
What Lang found was blue asbestos, now known to be the most harmful kind. One day he takes a chunk of it home.
He tells the story of how he had a visitor to Mulga Downs.
This is Stuart Reid. Lang spoke to him for an oral history interview for the National Library.
And I think it might have been a doorstop or something. He showed them this, and this person said to him, "Look, you can get $70 a pound for this stuff." And this person actually said, "I will buy it from you at that price." So it was a commitment that he had. So he had a market.
So I scratched up the gorges like a goanna and pegged out what I knew where the best of the deposits were.
And so begins the asbestos industry in the Pilbara. Lang sets to work. He picks out the leases for asbestos in the mid-1930s, and by 1938 he establishes a relatively small operation with his business partner, Peter Wright.
A lot of fellows came down, some 300 or so, moved in there like a gold rush, and they used to gouge the stuff out and hammer the rock off it, put it in bags.
Lang calls the mine Wittenoom, naming it after the man off whom his father bought Mulga Downs Station. In those early days, the world is on the precipice of war. Miners use explosives, hand tools and a mill to mine and export asbestos. mainly for its fire and heat-resistant properties, to be used in the war in gas masks. Lang is given an exemption from being conscripted because of this operation.
The far-off Hammersley Ranges were the nation's only commercial deposits of blue asbestos, and one company wanted to get at them.
In 1943, Hancock and Wright sell 51% of the operation to the Colonial Sugar Refinery Company, or CSR, who want to enter the booming asbestos market.
CSR had long relied on cutting sugarcane for a living, but they were looking for new fields to conquer.
And even though Lang had sold the majority of his stake in it, he was still involved, managing it until 1948, when Hancock and Wright then sell out entirely.
Wittenoom provides a fine example of rapid development by progressive private enterprise. It is a monument to the success of Australia's post-war migration program.
A mining town is established off the back of the industry. It's also called Wittenoom.
And of the total population of nearly 900, 3/5 are migrants, and 20 different nationalities are employed by the operating companies.
CSR operates the mine for more than 20 years and exports 161,000 tonnes of raw asbestos. Wittenoom becomes the main exporter of asbestos in Australia and the biggest mine of its type in the country.
Each year, 6,000 tonnes of refined fibre leave Australia's only blue asbestos field. But the immensity of the known deposits ensure a long and prosperous future for the town born as a result of the faith and enterprise of the operating company, a company responsible for many fine achievements in the industrial history
The battleship is breaking up the sky.
And now it's sort of sitting in history's dustbin, whereas in actual fact, what was really happening is that there was this unfolding tragedy of people discovering that they had, mesothelioma or related asbestos diseases, and thousands of people die. It's a shocking and tragic and deeply unsettling part of our modern history, particularly in relation to treatment of workers.
And I don't know which lyrics you believe to be the most potent, but I think the one that stands out for me is the company takes what the company wants. Nothing's as precious as a hole in the ground.
No, well, I mean, it's one of those things where you're really trying to distill something which is a hard political fact into a song which has got some emotional resonance to it, but you can't get away from that brutal reality.
The company takes what the company wants, and nothing's as precious as
The actual phrase blue sky mine, do you remember where that came from? Was that from the book, or were you guys sitting around and like...
It's a good question, Joe, and I'm taking a big deep breath because I can't actually remember. I mean, it's a classic Midnight Oil song in many ways because it's greater than the sum of its parts, which is often the case and needs to be.
I was going to ask near the end when it's, we've got nothing to fear. Can you talk to me about that line? That's the one I can't quite work out.
Well, I think the idea is that we can't crawl back into our sheltered space if we've been affected by something to lick our wounds, or if we feel indignant about it, just to curse in the darkness.
we got nothing to fear.
We have to go back out into the light and be back out in public spaces and in politics or wherever it might be in order to say what we think about something like this and perhaps express our support. And there's nothing to be feared in doing that.
The first case of mesothelioma is detected in a worker from Wittenoom in 1961. He would become the first to die. By 1975, 175 people have the disease and 27 have died.
I've had trades assistants die. One of my TAs has died of mesothelioma. I've had a number of friends die from mesothelioma. We guesstimate the death toll is around 3,000 as a consequence of Wittenoom. It is a significant causal factor. It's quite extraordinary.
Larry Graham is a former politician. He was heavily involved in trying to shut down the operation at Wittenoom.
I was the member for Pilbara from 1989 to 2005 as both a Labor, and I was elected in my last term as an independent. I don't have any titles other than retired.
That's a good title to have.
How's that?
Larry is highly critical of how the operation at Wittenoom develops under CSR.
Even by the lax standards of the day, Wittenoom was a terrible operation. It was poorly managed, poorly operated, poorly oversaw, and that particular company had more influence than the government ever credited with.
Concerns about asbestos-related harm were first raised in Australia in the 1920s. This was when asbestosis was first given its name. This was also the decade that the first claims were made by victims against asbestos companies in the US. These concerns intensified in the 1930s and 40s. By 1944, there was an official warning about asbestos at Wittenoom, with a mines inspector referring to the need to reduce dust levels, calling it, quote, a dust menace. In 1966, CSR closed their operation at Wittenoom. 2 weeks after, the Commonwealth Health Department is highly critical of dust at the mine and mill. The company blamed the falling price of asbestos and a lack of profitability.
The company's losses are said to have now reached $2.5 million, and as a result, the mine must close.
A month after its closure, Hancock and Wright buy back CSR's leases. In 1967, it's reported that they're going to reopen the mines and search for new asbestos deposits. The town of Wittenoom, according to Hancock and Wright, was not only going to live, it was going to grow and prosper, although this never eventuated.
Larry Graham would later make a speech to Parliament criticising this move, saying the following: to have contemplated reopening the mine in 1967, having regard to what was then known about blue asbestos, was not just ignorant, but an insult to all of those workers and their families who had already suffered and died by that time as a result of the conditions at Wittenoom.
In 1977, the first case for compensation from someone with mesothelioma from Wittenoom is initiated. It is brought against CSR, though the plaintiff dies before it ever reaches a courtroom. Lang continued to publicly defend the asbestos industry throughout this time and until his death. In 1978, he said the following in the Perth Daily News, which we've had read out by a voice actor.
Before becoming misled about the dangers of asbestos, one should remember that there are many substances in everyday household use which are potentially more harmful than this useful fibre. Sugar, for instance, when taken to excess, is more harmful than plutonium. In the case of Wittenoom, the mine was originally opened so that gas mask manufacturers could provide a filter capable of saving millions of lives. Yet 28 people from Wittenoom are reported dead before their allotted span, to enable a greater number to live.
Lang Hancock even went as far as sprinkling asbestos on his wheat bix to prove it was safe.
I say, mate, a bit of a con.
His friend John Singleton remembers this well.
I mean, in a wheat bix, probably doesn't scatter. If you're lying there, it becomes dust and infiltrates the lungs. I think it's different to eating it. Mind you, it got him a lot of publicity. Lang Hancock eats fibre, eats asbestos.
Did you see him do that? You saw him do that?
I had it with him.
What, you ate the asbestos on wheat bix too?
Bloody oath, yeah. And I had brown sugar on top of mine, which he dared to tell me it was bad for you. Lang, you're eating the stuff.
His story is that he commissioned surveys of the dust present at Wittenoom and compared it to the asbestos content of the dust on St George's Terrace. So you get asbestos dust comes from the brakes on cars, and that there was more in St George's Terrace than there was in Wittenoom. And his view was that Wittenoom was perfectly safe.
Extraordinarily effective, but absolute nonsense. The Lang Hancock propaganda was the prevailing view, and these poor people in Wittenoom were being made victims, and the government was picking on them for some reason. No one ever explained what the reason was. but the government was picking on them. None of that is true, and none of that was established by the facts. I had to go and tell the people in Wittenoom that they were wrong, and it wasn't a pleasant meeting, I can tell you.
It's not until 1988 that mesothelioma victims from Wittenoom win their first legal victory. The judge in that case rules that CSR acted with continuing, conscious and contumelious disregard for its workers' safety. CSR begins settling claims out of court in 1989 and pays $18 million to 200 Wittenoom claimants.
This is PM, I'm Paul Murphy, and this evening a settlement for the victims of Wittenoom asbestos.
It's a magnificent day and it's an emotional day for the victims of Wittenoom and the people who have been looking after them all this time. It's really the culmination of years of struggle. It's a day that means that 201 of them will receive their compensation in the next 3 weeks.
Its policy today is, quote, to meet valid claims on an equitable basis. On its website, CSR says it continues to assess all claims diligently and fairly, and where there is a demonstrated liability, CSR will seek to offer a fair settlement. Cases continue to this day. Hancock Prospecting has been named as a defendant alongside CSR, the state government and the Shire of Ashburton in compensation claims from victims. But details of these cases and how many are unknown, as most claims are settled confidentially out of court. Lang Hancock always denied any responsibility for what happened at Wittenoom.
Today the mine site lies abandoned. You can still see the scars it left on the landscape.
The town of Wittenoom begins to fall apart in the 1970s as residents start to leave. In 2007, it's de-gazetted by the government. Road signs are removed, the town's officially erased from the maps. But 3 million tonnes of asbestos waste, known as tailings, remain, defiling the beautiful gorges around the town. Hancock Prospecting holds the titles to those areas until 1979. They're confiscated by the state government once Hancock Prospecting stopped paying rent.
The old asbestos mining town of Wittenoom in our Pilbara will be closed permanently. The state government has been concerned with the number of tourists and thrill seekers still visiting the former town.
In 2022, the state government buys and demolishes the town's 14 remaining buildings. They ban tourists from visiting the area, and they evict the remaining residents.
If we weren't going anywhere, if this mine would have been still very active, not in asbestos, would have been a different sort of commodity, you know, well, we probably could have had a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know? But
when you were a kid, you played with the tailings, it was...
I played with it. My hashing bag was the hop, skip, jump thing.
Like the tailings were in the hashing bags.
Yeah. And your dad got asbestosis?
Yeah.
And lots of your family?
We never went that far to check ourselves out, so never occurred to us to go and get a check, you know.
Was there a lot of dust around when you were
all my family, my siblings, all my sisters and brothers, they're born here. I don't know what they've got, you know. So one was born down in the bush. Then all bush boys, you know, from Mulga Downs.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to go and get a checkup?
Well, I don't want to, because it's going to be something that I'm going to be thinking about later on down the track, but if I don't want to start thinking about it now, because you never know, I might have it. But I'm happy with what I'm doing now and living the life that I wanted to do.
2002 marks the 50th anniversary of Lang's discovery flight. And to celebrate the moment, Gina decides she would like a statue to be erected of her father, located near the entrance to Kings Park in Perth. But the proposal faces resistance because of Hancock's involvement in the asbestos industry. The backlash is such that the Perth City Council shelves the idea. Gina is unhappy. Hancock Prospecting immediately takes out ads in the West Australian. They downplay Lang's involvement in the industry. The ads talk about the real sham about the Wittenoom issue. They plead for people to, quote, not link Lang Hancock, or even more unfoundedly, the Hancock family, Gina and John, were not born in the 40s, with the whole Wittenoom issue and the suffering it has caused. The ads also say they have sympathy for victims, but say the family is not the cause of this terrible tragedy. Gina also writes a letter to the Asbestos Diseases Society of Australia. And while that letter has never been made public, Larry Graham was one of those who read it at the time.
And then I felt duty-bound to have to say something because the letters that were coming in from the Hancock family and group of companies were quite extraordinary.
The Asbestos Diseases Society of Australia writes back. Larry Graham takes their letter to Parliament and, amid the furor over the statue, reads it into Parliament. Unfortunately, Parliament wasn't recorded at that time, but we gave Larry a call.
Hello.
Hi. And asked him to read what he said on that day from the official transcript.
Okay, that's cool.
Take it away, Larry.
I'll read directly from Hansard. I'd like to read into Hansard the response from the Asbestos Diseases Society to the first ever contact it had with the Hancock family. Dear Mrs. Rinehart, thank you for your letter of October the 24th, 22. We have not previously heard from you and your family. Your letter, however, is factually erroneous and insensitive. The antipathy that is felt by members of this organisation towards your late father is based upon a number of indisputable facts. Although he may not have been the first to discover or even mine blue asbestos, it's doubtful there would have been a blue asbestos industry in Western Australia but for the activities of Lang Hancock.
He also tells Parliament about an experience he had 2 years after Lang's death, when he travelled to Wittenoom as part of a government select committee, of which he was the chair.
It came as a great surprise to the members of the committee to find that in 1994, not 1944, the Hancock group of companies still had employees working in the blue asbestos mine in Wittenoom. It was extraordinary and unbelievable. And despite all the protestations by the Hancocks that they could not have known about the dangers, the facts and the evidence reveal the exact opposite. I stress that that happened in 1994, half a century after it was widely known that working with blue asbestos caused serious life-threatening and terminal diseases. It took a specific act of Parliament to cease those operations. The Hancock family and its companies stated they did not know or were not aware and that the government had allowed it. It is impossible to argue that Hancock and Wright, particularly the late Lang Hancock, during any stage of the development of the asbestos industry in Wittenoom were not aware of their responsibilities.
Larry concludes his speech to Parliament with the following.
The asbestos industry has caused hundreds of deaths in this state. Lang Hancock cannot be divorced from that industry. He was, and he often claimed to be, the father of the asbestos industry. I have no desire to cause any offence to his family, but I violently object to the innovative rewriting of history and the excuse-making that allows the Hancock family to delete from history the contribution he made to the deaths of hundreds of people in this state.
Thank you.
Good on you.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Bye.
Thank you.
In 2022, Hancock Prospecting put out a media statement saying they had no intention of reopening Wittenoom. In response to a request for comment from Guardian Australia, Hancock Prospecting provided the following, which we've had read out by a voice actor.
The alleged suggestion by Mrs. Rinehart is again incorrect. Mrs. Rinehart clearly referred to owning and operating an iron ore mine. Lang Hancock and Peter Wright and partner had a very small mine further up the gorge, too often confused with the large CSR mine, which Hancock and Wright were unable to finance any share of development, so sold out to CSR. Their earlier activities took place in a remote area, away from the town and public access. Total production under Hancock and Wright's control is estimated at just 50 tonnes, a very small fraction of CSR's Wittenoom output. In contrast, CSR, the owner and operator responsible for the much larger Wittenoom mine and who had long-term management, extracted approximately 161,000 tonnes of asbestos between 1943 and 1966, when CSR ceased operations. Hancock and Wright's contribution equates to less than 0.04% of total production, with Mr. Hancock's share less than 0.02%. In relation to tailings, Hancock did not mine the asbestos that has created the tailings site near CSR's old mine and process plant. Hancock and Wright had no equity in CSR's expanded operations. Further unrehabilitated tailings in and around Wittenoom are in no way related to prior activities by Hancock. They are the result of historical actions by other organisations, including the local shire. Hancock Prospecting is supportive of any practical initiative to remediate the Wittenoom area. This historical rewrite underscores the extremely limited scale and duration of Hancock and Wright's involvement, which ended well before the large-scale industrial operations that caused the tailings stockpile and environmental legacy associated with Wittenoom.
The gorges of Wittenoom still contain the millions of tonnes of asbestos waste, minus the considerable amount that is washed into the environment with every spell of rain.
It's what? Over 40,000 hectares. Every time you get rain, every time you get strong storms, you get dispersal of asbestos-related dust and waste. It's untenable that it should be allowed to continue.
The state government currently has no plans to clean up the contamination at Wittenoom. Tourists are banned from visiting the exclusion zone. Standing in front of the giant signs that warn you of danger, it's hard to pass how beautiful the area is from the dangers here at the same time. It's incongruous. It's the same landscape as the adjacent Karajini National Park that the government is encouraging tourists to visit.
People go up there and say, oh, there's all these lovely waterholes, and they are lovely. It's a truly beautiful place. But when you stop and have a look through the beautiful, fresh, clear water at the rocks you're walking on, they are asbestos tailings. They contain fibres. Mm. So when you're walking around the area, you are releasing fibres. It is seriously unbelievable that it's allowed to exist, and the government still thinks we don't have to do anything about it.
I want people to come here.
Yeah.
I want people to see my traditional homeland, how it was impacted.
It's part of the history now.
Yeah. We may never live to tell the story.
And it's obviously very beautiful in there.
No, it's always been pretty for me anyway, you know, whether it's drought or like this. Then it gets very harsh, you know, very hot and droughty. But when you see rain come, you can see the difference.
If this area, if none of this was contaminated, what would you be doing with, like, what would your relationship be like to this area? What would you be doing out there?
I would have been just visiting. Like normally, like my traditional people lived and hunted and taking in the view of and praising it as in my culture and stories that I have for it.
There's lots of beautiful birds around. What are we hearing? Do you know what they are?
Oh, yeah, honeysuckers. Yeah, all kinds of birds. Yeah, you hear the ones that's singing out there, the magpie. You hear them early in the morning or late in the afternoon.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Barry Cassidy here with a special message for our Melbourne listeners. This Thursday, come and be part of our live audience when we record back-to-back Barrys at Federation Square. Come on down to hear Tony Barry and me try and make sense of this election result. You can get your tickets at the Wheeler Centre website. That's Wheeler Centre, all one word, wheelercentre.com. We'd love to see all you Melburnians there.
There's another one.
It's so loud.
It's a 43-degree day in front of the Oski Roadhouse in the Pilbara, a truck stop between Mulga Downs and Roy Hill. Trucks pull in at all hours of the day. It's one of the only places to grab a bite to eat or a drink, or if you need a place to stay, for more than 100 kilometres in any direction.
Oh, shit. I don't sound good recorded, mate, so I don't know how that's going to work.
No one likes the sound of their
No one likes it. No one does.
We're sitting outside on a concrete bench under some shade in front of the roadhouse, talking to some people who occasionally do contract work for Gina's mine, Roy Hill.
I mean, Auntie Gina, she looks after me.
Why do you call it Auntie Gina?
Because it's just, I don't know, just like a sign of respect.
And endearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone I spoke to in the Pilbara that had worked at Roy Hill said the same thing. The conditions were great and Gina treats her staff well.
The people who we work for when we do Roy Hill works don't say anything negative about her.
And so what's it like? So, okay, so everyone says pretty good conditions, like good beds, good food.
Best.
There's like
best of
the mattress toppers.
Yep.
The food is good. Like when we went, it was like the best thing we've ever eaten.
Oh,
so good.
I mean, it makes such a big difference. You can have like, you know, apples and oranges, but then there was mangoes, and what's the other one? The dragon fruit.
Yeah.
Oh, and we were like...
It was the first time I'd ever seen
there
a
were
dragon
muffins.
fruit. It was up here.
And so the water tastes so good there. We call it
Gina Paradise.
We call it. We call it.
That's a new name, Gina Paradise.
That's nice. Time we go.
All right, we got to go too. Thanks for the chat, guys. I find the whole construct of Roy Hill to be endlessly fascinating. There's this tension. You have this intensely private person telling a very public story about Roy Hill all the time. You constantly hear things. For example, the end-of-year raffles where workers can win bonuses worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's constant celebrations, people in pink hard hats, there's the National Mining Days, the list goes on. But at the same time, Roy Hill was closed to outsiders. And so the reason I'm talking to workers like these ones is to try and find out more. But full-time employees, they're a lot harder to find. They aren't in the nearby towns like Newman or Nullagine because they live and work on site. They fly in and out of the private Roy Hill airport. So it's basically like Roy Hill is its own enclave. And I really wanted to know what it's like to work for Gina.
When you work in the industry, you're a beneficiary. So there is respect there for having a job in that organisation and being offered opportunities. But there's this weird culture that comes with it that you have to accept.
People had to call her Mrs. Rinehart or the chairman. No way you could call her Gina. Nobody could in a month of Sundays.
Lang talking about less regulation and red tape is exactly the same shit-she diarrheas in company speeches and emails. Still now, decades later, she's quite literally Lang Mark II, no difference.
For every one of me, there are probably 10 pro-Ginas. I think most people either accept it, don't care, embrace it, or leave. It's this whole don't bite the hand that feeds you mentality. It's a weird environment to work in.
I eventually get in touch with 3 separate people who have all worked at Roy Hill and are happy to talk on the condition of anonymity. We've replaced their voices with actors.
Hi, I'm Shane.
Hi, I'm Pete.
Hey, I'm Zach.
Between the three of them, they describe their experience working at Roy Hill and a distinct culture, which they say is embraced by some, but not all. And I should add, these are just the opinions of 3 people out of the more than 4,000 Hancock prospecting employees.
Christmas one year, there was an announcement that went around to everyone in the building saying, "You're requested to be in the foyer at such and such a time because the chairman has an announcement to make." Then another email went around basically telling everyone that it was not a request, it was a direction, and people were told they had to applaud the chairman. It was like their leader type stuff. It's bizarre, but no one really talks about it. People just look at each other with a look and say, "Just take the paycheck. It's a good paycheck."
One thing that these employees told me was about the bonuses that workers receive at the end of the year, what's officially known as the chairman's profit scheme. They say that in the lead up to those bonuses arriving, employees are encouraged to write a thank you message to Mrs. Rinehart and send a photo. One such email request, sent from the CEO of Hancock Prospecting, Gerhard Veldsman, says the following.
Please take the time to think about what these bonuses and benefits mean to you and your family. I know that Mrs. Rinehart loves to read all of your messages.
These thank you messages are then collated and bound into what's called a Thank You Mrs. Rinehart book. Copies are made and distributed around the company.
I look through it and there are these shockingly very personal thank yous that some people are openly going to do. But other people, you were coerced. You know, we've got 2,000 employees. We've only got 300 thank yous. And come on, you guys, you never know what's going to happen next year and you don't want to get her upset.
Oh, it's such a fucking wild concept. We're encouraged to email her thanks for literally making her the richest person around. Because the transaction where I work my guts out and she becomes even more rich is not enough. We should thank her yearly, apparently.
These workers also say that Gina's political views, which largely align with Donald Trump, filter into the workplace.
She might be a genius mining boss lady, but she has no original thought in her head when it comes to public portrayal.
The worker we are calling Pete describes the environment at one such event, where workers were invited to a work function hosted by Gina, only to be played a video message from Peter Dutton, who was then the opposition leader.
This was my first exposure. So this wasn't a big dinner to celebrate the troops at all. This had devolved into a weird IPA rally with the federal opposition leader telling us we would all be far better off with him in government. I've since come to realise that these verbal diarrheas are not intended for us to hear at all. The speeches are always filmed, and whoever these are then broadcast to is the actual intended audience. We just provide her with a crowd for looks. Otherwise, it would just be her talking shit into the void.
But this subliminal messaging and influence she has over people, she can influence her employees, times their partners, times the people you engage with. You're also making an enemy of the more progressive policies that are out there. And the more small-minded you are making everyone, the more division you contribute to.
We've also seen emails where workers are asked to familiarise themselves with the legacy of Lang Hancock, calling him a patriotic and iconic Australian. However, the more uncomfortable parts of his legacy aren't mentioned.
When we have to hear about the successes and thank yous to Lang Hancock, we have to acknowledge his history and what he's created and how we benefit. But when someone raises something that is not as supportive, and we need to maybe recognise that, it's shut down, it's not relevant, it's in the past. Well, his history's in the past as well.
A spokesperson for Hancock Prospecting provided us with the following comment, which we've had read out by a voice actor.
There is no compulsion to write a thank you to Mrs. Rinehart each year, and there is no such request by Mrs. Rinehart for her staff to write thank you letters. However, it is wrong and not true for such allegations, if made, to describe a collection of letters sent to Mrs. Rinehart as only thank you letters. It is a wonderful way for Mrs. Rinehart to be able to keep abreast of her staff and what is important in their lives. They often enclose photos, be it of trips they took to visit their original homeland, or of being able to host their relatives for a visit here, or of weddings, new family members, home renovations, home extensions, their dog and more, writing of things that are important in their year. The alleged comment that Mrs. Rinehart only uses Roy's staff as background crowd for her film speeches, again, is not truthful.
The other thing I wanted to interrogate is the community benefits that flow from Roy Hill and Hancock prospecting. Gina frequently emphasises her and her company's contributions to Australia. She's been awarded an Officer of the Order of Australia honour for her philanthropic work and is a known supporter of breast cancer causes, even delivering luxury hampers to patients in hospitals in Perth. She's also a known funder of Australian Olympic sports. But the full extent of her philanthropy is unknown and unreported. What we do know is that Australia's richest person has not once featured on the top 50 list of Australian philanthropists, which is researched and compiled by the Australian Financial Review and JB Weir. A charity called the Hanrine Foundation is linked to the mine at Roy Hill. Hancock Prospecting says it was set up to address community concerns. Now, the company has no obligations to donate any particular amount. But reports filed with a charity regulator show that since its inception, when compared to the income from the mine, it has given out just 1 day's worth of net profits in its lifetime. It's received $10.5 million in revenue and distributed only $4.6 million of that. And so while we're in the Pilbara, I thought I'd ask around to find out how Roy Hill was impacting people on the ground today. I'm just going to put you on speaker so Joe, my colleague, can hear as well.
Hi. Okay. So the story you're proposing it has connections in this particular space here in Newman.
This led me to a man called Devon Kamara.
Yeah, you'll get the story. How you'll get it will
unfiltered, you say. You've actually met him before. He's Hilda Kickett's nephew. He told me that there were some Indigenous Martu men who live not far from Roy Hill who heard I was in the area, and they had something they wanted to say.
They'll be basically uncensored in a sense that they speak from their heart.
I wasn't really sure what to expect, but they told us to meet them at the Pumpaginia Community Centre, just outside of Newman.
Look, we're all inside. We
get there. It's another incredibly hot day. Devon greets us.
So what I can do is I'll take you in, introduce us.
He takes us to sit under the shade of the community centre. It's a big open space and there's 12 Martu men all sitting around an esky full of water.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Okay. Yeah. So this is Sarah. Sarah's the reporter from The Guardian. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Sarah, do you want to introduce your team?
Yeah, of course. This is Ellen, our photographer, and Joe, our producer.
Hello.
So
I can't help but notice some beautiful zebra finches on the ground around us. It's so hot the birds are panting, their beaks open.
Yeah. What are we talking about? We're talking about Roy Hill?
Despite the vast and growing wealth of Rinehart's company, the socio-economic status of Indigenous people in the East Pilbara, where most of Hancock Prospecting's wealth is generated, remains well below the national average. Less than half of Indigenous Australians in the East Pilbara are in the workforce. The 2021 census shows the median weekly personal income of Indigenous Australians in the region is $311, less than 20% of the figure for the region's non-Indigenous residents. I'm interested in how Roy Hill contributes to communities in the Pilbara. Obviously, Hancock is making so much money from the land, from the minerals in the ground, but what are they giving back? And so one of the first questions I ask is, what does Roy Hill do for you?
No, I just want to say what Roy Hill, they sponsor us for the program that we run every year and the youth festival that we run in the community. They sponsor us for swimming lesson, school holiday program. That's the main good thing about Roy Hill, that they give us some sponsorship. So.
But then I ask, is that enough? I mean, to Hancock Prospecting, sports sponsorships are a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, I think, they can do more and better stuff.
And this question seems to open the floodgates. Bruce starts saying that since Roy Hill opened, the Martu claim they've seen sites that they consider sacred impacted by the mining operation.
Our culture has been dug up. Yeah, it's pretty sad for us to see that. We've got elders here sitting around now, very hurt. And we drive past the guts of their mine and see that all of us, young kids, elders, we cry for their country.
Can you tell me your name and where we are?
Jimmy Williams.
Jimmy Williams?
Bangor, you don't know, Cotton Creek, yeah.
What did you think when you first learnt that Roy Hill was being mined?
First thing I thought was, I know it was a site.
Sorry, can you say
I was a
again?
bit worried about the site might get damaged, which it did got damaged. That's Roy Hill, yeah.
It's important to clarify that the Martu people are not the native title holders for the Roy Hill mine. That right belongs to the Nyabali people, who were given determination in 2018. The Nyabali people and 2 other Indigenous groups have negotiated land use agreements with Hancock Prospecting and receive royalty payments from the mining operation. Hancock Prospecting also says it has paid more than $300 million to Indigenous groups. But the Martu people say they have a traditional connection to the Nyabali and a connection to the country. They say they have been caretakers of the land for almost 100 years, but receive no payments. Guardian Australia is not suggesting Gina Rinehart or Hancock Prospecting have done anything wrong. They enter agreements with the group the courts have determined to be native title holders. We're not suggesting that Gina Rinehart or Hancock Prospecting were aware of or intentionally impacted sites that were sacred to the Martu people. After colonisation, the Nyabali people were largely displaced, leaving the Martu to live on their land, practising their law and culture, and maintaining their songlines.
Because the Martu is a keeper of the law. He is a, you know, like the Jesus Christ cup, the Holy Grail? This is what the Martu are, the Holy Grail. Once we lose this here, Martu, we all finish.
Slim Williams, from Bangor, originally from Jigalong, but I'm in Newman. The smarter people that knows the knowledge of this country and kept the culture, you know, strong.
And the Martu say that the land that the mine is on contains locations that are an important part of their dreaming, their jukapa.
He's dreaming there. Il Kangaroo, that's his dreaming. Yeah. Malon Jurura, Balo Il Kangaroo, Balo Nyagura. Jamura. That's his dreaming.
The red dirt is the...
We are red ochre people.
That's our dreaming.
And now they claim that those sites are unavailable to them.
And it's too late to say anything about that country now. We got it in our heart and we got it in our mind.
We've still got it here, in our heart and in our head.
We're only going to work from that and practice law and culture by not showing the water hole, showing anything around that area. But I can't build a place up again to make it how it's been in the past.
Guardian Australia contacted the Nyabali Aboriginal Corporation for comment, but did not receive a reply. We sit outside the community centre in the shade for the afternoon and talk.
You ever heard about that movie called Rabbit Proof Fence?
Yep.
That's my street grandmother that got taken away from here.
The emotions are raw and unguarded as each of the Martu men speaks from the heart.
For myself, I know I'm a rich person through my culture. I live all my life in Yemen. I don't have a house. You know, I'm with my father, looking after my father and my families. I look after anybody. We're missing out on a lot of things. That's the only reason why I'm saying this, you know? And that thing is making billions and billions, and we get nothing out of it. Yeah.
Could you ask Gina Rinehart's permission to go to Roy Hill?
No, we don't have it there.
Gina's country now.
Yeah, Gina's country. That's her country, right?
Yeah, Gina's country. Yeah.
She's sleeping on top of the money. And look at us. We are here. We are here out in the country. We don't make nothing. We just lost. Just walking around like a lost sheep.
What would you like people to know about the East Pilbara?
This is a breadbasket for all of Australia. And Gina Rinehart, she will kill to keep that. She will kill to keep that her own.
It's important to stress the native title is determined by the courts. And the story of the Matu is a complex historical one, stemming from colonial displacement. But they say they are frustrated with the native title system and with how the network of Aboriginal corporations and charitable trusts in the Pilbara are functioning.
In 6 years' time, 7 maybe, songline dead. I am really fucking frustrated with this. I don't like to see elders getting left out. They're the leader, that's our king. We bow down to our elders because they got the songline. Our land been dug up, and now we're singing a dead country. The white man has killed our country. They got a big hole, and we're singing. We're still singing.
That's a story song from what you do.
A spokesperson for Hancock Prospecting provided the following comment, which we've had read out by a voice actor.
In addition to funds dispersed from the Han Ryan Foundation, Roy Hill provides millions more in financial support to programs and initiatives through direct partnerships, sponsorships and donations. For example, over the past few years alone, Roy Hill and Hancock businesses have contributed more than $5 million to Telethon, a West Australian charity that funds the health and wellbeing of sick, vulnerable and disadvantaged children. Roy Hill and Hancock Prospecting have also donated $4 million to the Royal Flying Doctor Service in West Australia. There are also multi-million-dollar donations towards breast cancer care and men's health initiatives, along with significant financial support to education, health and supporting initiatives. Hancock businesses have formal agreements with several traditional owner groups throughout the Pilbara, in accordance with the Native Title Act and relevant legislation. These agreements distribute significant royalties to each group, as well as other agreed assistances. Roy Hill and Hancock go beyond our legislative requirements and agreements to support programs and initiatives that deliver meaningful benefits across the Pilbara. From supporting remote Aboriginal schools with delivery of fresh fruit and vegetables every month, to our weekly support of a Port Hedland program for at-risk youth and a highly successful school holiday program for Pilbara youth. This support is part of a long-term and ongoing commitment initiated by our Executive Chairman, Mrs. Gina Rinehart, to enhance the wellbeing, health and education outcomes for both individuals and the regions where we work.
That is spirit problem sung line. Yeah.
Was there anything else you want to say before we go?
Anybody?
One last thing?
No, we are good. Yeah. Everything is was said, you know.
What Lang set in motion decades ago changed the shape of the Pilbara forever. Money has flowed from the ground, a family fortune made, a landscape changed forever, an industry emerged. People have been dispossessed of their land, and it all comes back to the story told about that little plane, a 2-seater Oster J5 autocrat.
Nobody wanted to come here 60, 70 years ago, or 100 years ago. Nobody wanted to come here. And then Lang was flying over with his mate, Peter Wright, and next minute, Gina got a big money and she's worth what? Yeah, 40 billion.
I I couldn't help but come back from the Pilbara and wonder, whatever happened to that plane? Regardless of whether you see the mining industry as good or bad, this is a pretty big part of Australian history, isn't it? Is this plane not a bit of an icon? Shouldn't it be in a museum somewhere? So I set out to find it. A source I spoke to told me that the plane was still around. It was hanging in something called the Mining Museum Hall of Fame in Kalgoorlie. Some photos from TripAdvisor seem to back this up. People in front of photos of the plane, the Oster Autocrat, green and white. But the museum had since closed. I tried calling, but couldn't get through. Then I found a speech made by a close friend of Gina's, in which he says,
"Above us is the similar Oster aircraft to the one flown by Lang Hancock over his Pilbara iron ore discoveries."
Which was a bit weird because why donate a replica? Why not the actual plane?
Gina, is it true that you risked your life by flying it up there onto that hook? Thanks, Gina, for your support and encouragement. In a short time, this gallery will be filled with many similarly impressive.
Where is the actual plane? It turns out Bernard Lagan had that same question.
I wanted to find out what happened to the Oster. And I knew the registration number, which was from pictures of the plane. And then I discovered the aircraft had crashed, and I discovered that it had never been connected to Lang Hancock. And so I worked backwards from there.
The plane's final journey is a tragic one and comes after Lang sells it in 1972.
The plane was bought by a farmer by the name of Armstrong, Murray Armstrong, took it to his property in Western Australia.
According to the official crash report, Murray Armstrong, quote, assisted by 2 other people also not authorised to perform such work, modified and fitted to the aircraft a long-range fuel tank of unknown history. He's only equipped with a student pilot licence and only allowed to fly with a certified instructor.
Nevertheless, on the first Sunday in December 1973, he takes 2 16-year-old boys up for a flight. The plane is only equipped with 2 seats.
And as soon as they took off, the Oster engine started to splutter. The engine gave out. He tried to bank, lost airspeed, and it just pancaked into the ground, and all 3 people on board were killed.
The cause of the accident reads, quote, that the pilot was not adequately trained or experienced to cope with a power loss, which probably occurred as a result of improper maintenance practices. I guess it sort of tarnishes this romantic story, doesn't it?
Well, it does a bit. I mean, although it was, no longer Hancock's plane and he wasn't flying it. But I suppose it takes a bit of a very sad moment. I'm sure it was. Terribly sad story, and not long before Christmas as well.
Tune in on the 19th of May for episode 7 of Gina. Gina is recorded on Kaurna and Parramac land. It's hosted by me, Sarah Martin, and the series producer is Joe Koning. The executive producer is Shelley Hepworth, and Miles Martignoni is the head of audio. Sound design in this episode was by Joe Koning. Additional production by Jess Hamilton and Camilla Hannon. Additional research by Luca Idamani.